Hello, so welcome back. I have now the file cached. I can check on load from disk to load it. Now you can see when I go through the animation, I'm not seeing the calculation down there anymore, and I can turn on that template because I don't really need to see it. I'm happy with the particle effect, but as I stated earlier, right, I didn't calculate the velocity, so no velocity here. If you go to attribute and turn on V, right, I'm not seeing any velocity. Of course, we can calculate that really fast by using the trail again. Okay, and now you can see the trail. You can change the result type to compute velocity. Let's go to V, and we're now having velocity. All right. So after that, I'm gonna also create a attribute run go, right, just to play with it. And here inside of it, I'm gonna say, how about p scale, which is a known attribute, will be equal to a channel ramp. Then I'm gonna use a ramp to control it. So this is gonna be the size over lifetime. And here I need to say the age will divide the life, so that it's changing over lifetime. Click on that, and that's gonna give me the ramp here. I'm gonna tell it to go smaller first, and then gradually get bigger down the way, and then get smaller again. And here change the interpolation to like a Bezier error here, just to make it smoother. Doesn't really see much of a difference. Whoops. I guess I have to go back to really see the settings. Oh, here actually. Grab that. Constant, linear. This guy is smoother maybe. I don't think it's gonna make much of a difference. Anyways, so maybe this guy too, right, just to make it a little smoother here. Alright, anyway, not gonna play with it too much. One more thing I can do here is give it a global scale, so I'm gonna multiply that with another channel, call it size scale or multiplier, so that I'm having a new attribute down here to really tell it how big it is. Let's choose one for now, and before we really do fine-tune the size, we need to probably render it. So let's go to render view. I was rendering the trail before, so let's render it. Now you can see they're way too big. Let me zoom out. Way too big. So I'm gonna say, how about size to 0.1? Is it gonna be better? Still too much. 0.01. Even 0.005 to really make it weaker. Maybe just a little bit bigger than that. 0.008. Alright. Now they are pretty flat. The reason being for that is because that they are basically using a headlight for you. They're flat shading for now. Because I don't have any lights, so I'm gonna go here to this angle, holding down control and click on area light to drop on a light here real quick, and go to this view again, control and click to drop down another area light. Now I have two area lights, and here I'm also gonna, just for the sake of it, I'm gonna create a camera, control click to create the camera. Alright, so I have a camera here too. Alright. For area light 2, which is the field light here, I'm going to change the intensity to something like 1, so it's not as strong as the key light. Let's change the render camera to the camera we created and do a render. As you can see now, we're having a proper shading. To change the camera, you can grab this camera again, go choose the camera here underneath the viewer settings and lock it, so that you can really change where it is. Let's zoom in just a little bit and let's take a look. Cool. Maybe rotate this way. Alright. Now one more thing you always want to have on your particle system is, or basically any render is motion blur. You can of course do that in compositing based on like, do you have enough time to calculate motion blur, because that could be super slow based on how fast your stuff is moving. So here underneath the output, here I have this Mantra RPA, which is basically the renderer I'm using now. And here I'm going to tell it to underneath rendering to allow motion blur. Okay, now back here on the geometry level, you also want to grab the geometry node and go to render and go to sampling and allow it to do geometry velocity blur. Okay, those two things has to be on, and also you have to have velocity attribute here to enable motion blur. So let's see. Let me click on render. As you can see, it's much more blurrier, probably too blurry. And to fix that, I can probably make the velocity lower, because the trail calculates velocity and doesn't really sometimes accurate. It might be too big. So I'm gonna go back to the trail and take a look there, like that much, negative 58 per second. Like it's like 58 meters per second. That's too big. So I'm gonna change the velocity scale to 0.01. So they're getting really small now. 0.05, just a little higher than that, I guess. Let's take a look at the render. Now you can see it's not really blurring that much. I'm still having blurry edge, which is cool, right? Maybe just a little bit less blurry, because they're all kind of like blurring. But that's your choice now to either have bigger or smaller velocity. So 0.03, I guess. Still wanted to have some fuzzy result on the edge, but maybe still kind of see a sharper shape, more or less. Alright, so that's basically motion blur. Alright, so I guess that's how much we can, this is how much I want to introduce for now. There are much more things you can do with rendering, but all I want to introduce to you now is basically how to basically render this guy out. Alright, let me stop the render and go to, again, back to the Mantra here. And that's the render camera, which you do need one actually, otherwise it will not work. The valid frame range will be the render frame range. You can go to that much, 240 frames, that's 10 seconds. You can click on it to see that's basically using the frame start and frame end here. I want maybe only half of that, so I'm going to divide that by 2. As you can see, it's now 120. And other things like the render quality, if you wanted to crank that up, you can go to the render here, right? You can change some of the, oops, not there actually. The sampling here, the pixel sample 3, right? Change that to 6 to double the render quality to really have high quality render. And other things you can go individually to tweak the sampling. This is pretty close to unknown settings. That's like the camera AA thing, and those are like different AAs, like diffuse AA, global illumination AA, right? And things like that, I guess. Anyway, let's take a look. Oh, that's actually the camera AA thing. Sorry about that. That's the camera AA thing. Not quite familiar with this render. Anyway, so now we have this setting up. If you wanted to change other things like underneath the image, you can tell it to render some like the filter here, what filter you're using and things like that. And you can also tell it to render extra render passes. Maybe we can do something like this, like direct lighting or indirect lighting. Indirect lighting, it will render those passes. The format here will be XR, which is pretty good. Output pictures, right? That's where you put it, how you name it, and things like that. So maybe I can name it as particle sim, and operator name, maybe don't need that. Just particle simulation dot frame padding. So it's frame with 4 paddings and XR format. Okay. The resolution, you can override the camera resolution here and use the resolution here to tell it what resolution you want to go for. I think you can also don't override it, and then you have to go back to the object mode and grab the camera here and tell it what kind of the resolution you want to use here underneath view. Okay, so 120 is sorry, 720p is pretty good for me, but you can go higher than that if you wanted to. Alright, so with everything set it up, we can go ahead and do a render by pressing that render to disk. and it will start rendering. So I'm gonna let it render, and when it's done we can take a look. Okay, so thanks for watching, see you next time.